Okay, sorry about that.
Oh, thanks for remembering that. So I should say, Chief Hawk is unable to attend. So is it Detective Sergeant or Sergeant Detective?
Detective Sergeant.
Detective Sergeant Egley is here, filling in for him. So thank you for doing that. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I see June there. Thanks for doing our minutes.
Yes, hello.
Ready. Okay, so our first order of business is to approve the previous meeting minutes from January 18th.
I make a motion that we approve them.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay,
Hey, Amy, I do have a question. When you post, not the minutes, but the agenda, do the things like the article and other attachments, other than names, of course, that would not go out, but do other parts of the agenda? At council meetings, usually it's a packet of stuff that goes out. I just wondered if that's the case with this committee.
I don't believe so, but I don't actually post the agenda. I believe that's John Bojarski who does that.
Right, but we'd have to send him that stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
he's just pushes a button. He doesn't really know what's going on in all the committees. I just wondered.
No, it's a good question. I don't think so, but I don't know that there's any reason we wouldn't or shouldn't.
Yeah, sometimes it's good for the public to see, how many officers we have and how, what's going on in the whole gist of things, because it does affect them.
Yeah. I'm making a note to ask him about that. If that's something that other committees do, or if he recommends, we should definitely do
I
that.
don't know.
I'm just looking real quick. Town council does do a packet. I just looked real quick at the last activities advisory committee and the EAC committee, and they don't really have much more than an agenda. Not to say it wouldn't hurt to have, it's the minutes that we're approving. That really doesn't make sense either. So,
Yeah, if I didn't know what other committees did, I'm just asking.
yeah, I'm not sure either. So Amy, you can send a note to John, but I'll talk to him also.
Okay, yeah, good
Yeah.
question, Rita.
And just, if we consider doing that going forward, we'll just have to be very careful about
Oh, yes.
the instructions on what to post and what not to, because sometimes we get very, like personal information stuff and stuff that's not for public consumption. So if we do it, we just have to put some process in place for doing it.
Yeah, good point.
And I'd also just throw in, Dave, this as a former council member. We have a huge packet for council,
Yeah.
but that is, looked at over an hour or two to figure out which is public and which isn't, and what goes out, kind of thing. So there is, obviously, the agenda here isn't the same as the town council meeting, but similar concept of what is public and what wouldn't be considered public, in that packet, in that sense.
Yeah, good points. So speaking of John, I know there's been lots of emails flying around about access to the SharePoint site. I'm not an IT person. I have no idea what's going on. Is there anyone that has been able to access it?
No,
I have not.
I can work with John. I have IT background in SharePoint. I can work with him based off the challenges I've seen over the last week, and try to help out. I have a suspicion I know what the problem is.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Justin. Yeah,
Sure.
and I don't think he does it directly. I think he's the intermediary between us and the IT firm that McCandless employs. So I felt
Yeah.
bad for spamming his inbox with all those messages, but I didn't know who else to
So
contact.
Justin, it has nothing to do with our own computers and what is clicked and what isn't up in the, no?
Yeah, based off what I'm seeing, it's a permissioning authorization that needs to be arranged in a certain fashion. And this is very reminiscent of every other time I've had a SharePoint issue with people trying to log in. I'm set up a site. So I think I know what the issue is.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
I'd agree. Like it's probably mostly like I can get in, but I have a ton of McCandless email, and you guys are probably all in there as guests and got to
Yes.
figure out. And that's been sent over to our IT department to figure out.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
And I can help out if
Thanks, John.
needed. Sure.
Yeah. And I can get in, but I don't know why I can get in and no one else can, but. So the agenda that June sent out is sort of the shell, and I took that from the document we're gonna talk about in a moment. To make sure that every month we're thinking about public comments, communication reports, unfinished business, that sort of thing. So I don't think we have any communications and reports. Detective Sergeant Egley, you can tell us later on if there's updates from town of McCandless. But before we do that, I actually want to go into new business. And the reason I want to do that now, and I want to switch those two bullet points. So I want to talk about rules and regulations for the personnel board first. Because Falco is available until, I think he said 9:30. And then after that, he's going to be unavailable for most of the rest of the meeting. So if we can just switch those around, unless there's anything under unfinished business that we need to discuss before that.
Amy, the only thing I'd bring up, which I don't think is unfinished business, but is just to double check with Chief Hawk to make sure that this time isn't a conflict with something regular with him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
just,
He's in training this morning.
Yeah, I will say
Oh,
on behalf,
okay.
on behalf of the chief, we have to go to 2 days. Every police officer in Pennsylvania has to go to 2 days of mandatory updates every year. His 2 days just happen to be today and tomorrow, so it will not be a regular occurrence. These are literally the only 2 days of the year that he'll be in the training that he's in.
okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure we weren't putting him in some bad position where he had to choose, either coming here or doing something else that was regular, but it sounds like that's not the case, so.
That's not the case.
But thanks for asking. Hey, Jack, welcome. Okay, so I sent out a document that Falco has been helping us with. Let's see, so it starts with the name of his law firm, Maiello, blah, blah, blah. It's a very long name. It's the Word document that is like 30 some pages. So let me just explain what this is, why we're doing it, and what I've done thus far. So we as a personnel board do have some operating principles, I guess I would call them, embedded within Article 137, which is the document that governs how we operate here in the town of McCandless. It's not as detailed as we would like it to be, as we've seen in the past. I don't know, I've been doing this, I think, like 5 years. There's lots of things that are left to interpretation that we want to get nailed down a little bit more. So Falco provided this Civil Service Rules and Regulations document from the Civil Service Commission as sort of a template for that. So we can change it, we can add to it. It's fairly generic, but since we are beholden to the civil service processes, we thought it was a good place to start. So what I did with this document was I went through and I started to change some things. Maybe not as much as we need, well, definitely not as much as we need to change eventually, but so for example, in the definitions section, the commission is what we call the personnel board. We are the commission. I didn't change that in every single circumstance that it shows up throughout the document, but we're referring to the commission. So one of the first things I did when it starts on page, what is that? I don't even know what page that is. Oh, the pages are weird, but when it says chapter 2, the commission, it looks like it's about 5 pages in. We consist of 5 members now who are qualified electors and are appointed by the McCandless Town Council. Initially, if this board were to completely dissolve and they were to start a new one, 2, 3, and 4 years, and then thereafter for terms of 3 years. Anything I wanted to discuss or put out there for perspective, I put in highlight. So, Brian, I don't know, are all of the boards 3 years, or could we consider having someone on this board longer? And the reason I ask before you answer is that the work that this board does is, I think it takes a while to get up to speed. So if you've never done hiring of a police officer list, that process in and of itself can take a year. So to have a 3-year term, I thought it might be better if we have slightly longer terms, but I don't want to do that if that's inconsistent with the rest of the boards.
Well, they're all, I don't think there's a specific answer to that. Usually committees like this are set up based on how many members there are. So if there were 3 members, and civil service usually is like this, there's 3 members, 3-year terms, then you're turning one over, like in theory, you're not turning a whole bunch over at once. So, and I've seen, I've seen a municipal authority board in another community that's 5 members, they did 5-year terms. Usually it was more to stack the when terms expire versus thinking about what you're talking about. So like in that sense, but we probably need to check with whatever the charter actually says about the personnel committee and what that means. In that sense, obviously we've made some changes. So I doubt the charter is very specific, but I think it's open to some options.
Okay, well, that's good to know. And that's kind of what we're doing here is revising the charter because we've seen that it doesn't have enough specificity in a lot of circumstances, and in several circumstances it was actually inconsistent. So for example, we changed the charter to reflect that we have 5 members, but then the quorum wasn't changed. So
And when I'm talking about the charter, I'm talking about the town's charter itself, and we can't change that. But obviously the things we've been able to change here are things that we're allowed to change within the personnel committee and the town without the charter. Anything changed to the town charter needs a vote goes to a referendum vote to the whole town.
oh, okay.
And when you refer to the charter, are you talking about the ordinances? I mean, or what the ordinance say and what this say are 2 different things. What this document, I mean, in some cases, is that what you're trying to clarify, the ordinances?
Yeah.
Amy?
Oh,
This is Felco. The ordinances are what we're fleshing out with this document.
Right, okay.
So if we're gonna make a change that changes the terms of the ordinance, then the ordinance would have to be amended again to reconcile that. Otherwise, this document should be as consistent with the ordinance as possible, but providing the additional detail, to kind of flesh out the skeleton, so to speak. The ordinance would be more of the outline, and this would be more of the detail of how the board operates.
Gotcha. So it would have to be approved by council if there are changes?
If we're changing a fundamental term in the ordinance, then yes, such as Amy gave the example going from 3 to 5 members, that required an amendment to the ordinance.
Okay,
Which I think that has already happened. I think that specific example. So yeah, basically anything here that is not covered in the ordinance, we can change ourselves as long as it's not, in opposition to what the ordinance says. As long as it's not
Correct.
inconsistent with what the ordinance already says, we can change it ourselves. But if it's
Right.
something that's already in the ordinance, then town council, then we would either have to change it to match the ordinance or go to town council to ask them to change the ordinance.
right. So as an example, sorry, I was trying to see if I could share and now I can't find the meeting. There we go.
there's the screen, there you go.
I was trying to share the document and it was too confusing. So and I don't think we need to go through kind of line by line today. We're certainly not going to have the time. But I wanted to point out items to pay attention to look at. And then I would ask that between now and the next meeting, everyone look at it and do your own edits, revisions, that kind of thing. So to Falco's point, the ordinance already exists. Article 137, I think is what it's called.
Mhm.
We'll refer to this as the rules and regulations, which provide the flesh in the bones of the ordinance, if you will. However, we did already make the change from 3 to 5 members. The question that I would pose is, would we then want to make the change for term length from 3 to 5 years? Something to consider. I don't know how people feel about that, but like I said, I think it takes some time to get up to speed. I felt like I was just kind of starting to understand what was going on here after a couple of
Yeah.
years.
Yes, and I think that's a valid point, absolutely. But also consider you can reapply after, what, 3 years? So, you might want to change that. I don't know, but having a cohesive group of people working on this is really important because people come in and out and it does take that long. I'm just like getting acquainted with all of this and it is much deeper than some. Thanks.
Yeah.
Amy-
No, it's very
Amy?
disruptive, the turnover. Yeah, Jack.
To that point, that's probably why we have alternates, so that they're up to track speed and then they can apply.
Yep. So that is a perfect introduction to my next point, Jack. And I see Carolyn. Happy birthday a day late, Carolyn.
Carolyn,
Oh,
happy
happy birthday.
Birthday, Carolyn.
I missed that. Okay.
So Amy, before you jump in, just really quickly, the 3-year term, I just looked it up, the 3-year term is specified in the ordinance.
Correct.
And so if we want to change that, that's one we have to run up to town council, not ourselves.
Yep. Understood. So something to consider. Again, we don't have to nail it all down today. I'm trying to point out the elements of this document that I'd like you to pay particular attention to. And then I would like everyone to read through and see if there's other things that you would add, change, etc. Matt, especially, I think your perspective is important because you've been on a long time too. And David, you've seen, well, and Jack and Carolyn for that matter, you've seen the challenges we've had by not having enough specific instruction of how we operate. So I would say that the more specific we can be in this document, the better off we're going to be in have less ambiguity going forward. So Jack, to your point, so the next paragraph that I edited was how the alternates are treated when there's a vacancy. So in the past, the alternates are just like any other citizen. They have to apply, they have to interview, they have to be selected. So I'm proposing that if there's a vacancy, the longest termed alternate would be, if he or she was interested, would be automatically considered and appointed, still have to be appointed and voted in by town council, but we wouldn't have to go out and collect applications to fill that slot. We could simply look at our alternates, see if either or both of them are interested and appoint that person. And then, of course, there's a cascading effect. Then we would have to fill that alternate slot eventually, but I think that makes sense, but I don't know. You guys can think about that.
To that point, shouldn't alternates then come to the meetings and be up to speed on what's going on? I mean, I think in the past they were just totally ignored and most of them figured they weren't needed and left. And I can refer to a few people in that, but yeah, how do we use them before they're part of the commission, more so to speak?
Right. Well, alternates have always had the ability to vote if they're filling in for a member. So if we don't have a quorum or, and this was particularly relevant when there were only 3 members, maybe less so now that there's 5, but we don't have a quorum or members are missing, then the alternate can vote. But yes, Rita, I think that's absolutely right. We want more perspectives. So we have alternates there to be able to weigh in on things, and then they're more prepared when a position of they call it primary and secondary in this document. So when a primary position opens up, then they could just kind of slide right in, again, have to be voted in, but that would be my recommendation, that we consider alternates first and not just put it out to the general citizens who have no idea what we're doing here, perhaps.
Yeah, and the next paragraph of the document that you send, Amy, it actually specifies that the alternates, even if they're not voting, they can still take part in discussions and provide their input and things like that, which I think is right. I
Yes,
think,
I agree.
so you're getting the input of 7 people, even though only 5 are voting. But
Mhm.
that way it engages them so that if somebody is missing, they can step in, but we might want to make that clear to the alternates then that, hey, we're expecting you to attend meetings regularly and participate,
Yes.
because maybe that'll change their view on whether they want the position or not. Hopefully it wouldn't change their view, but you just don't know because that would kind of be a change from past practice.
Yep.
But I like that. I like that idea generally,
Okay.
the idea that you're setting forth, Amy.
Okay. So then. I just made some changes. We have 2 alternates, not 3, so I changed that. Some of the things I changed, Falco might say, no, you have to leave that in there, like, there's this phrase about and shall take an oath or affirmation of office. I don't recall ever doing that, but maybe that needs to stay. I don't know. The other thing that I thought was interesting was that no commissioners, so that's us, the commissioners, at the same time hold an elective or appointed office under the US government, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, or any political subdivision of Commonwealth, except that one member may be a member of the, I think in this case, it means
Town
town
council.
council, and one member may be a member of the teaching profession. I'm not sure how,
Because they work for the township, right? I think town council just changed that, didn't they, Jack?
We just changed an ordinance that it used to restrict anybody that wanted to have a position in a political party or a municipality, city, state, etc., that they would be permitted to outside the town. And if they're inside the town, they will have to go to the town manager to get approval.
I
So
think
it kind of negates what this says. In other words, this is saying we can't hold a position.
so this document is based on the Pennsylvania Civil Service rules. So the concept of civil service employment and civil service boards is to make them the least amount of political influence as possible. So the reason that's written that way is that you don't want people putting political influence on the civil service process. It's supposed to be a test. So that's why it's written. So this is, this document, the base of it is the civil service laws for towns, boroughs that exist, and the state also hires civil services. So that's the reason for this. The other ordinance that Jack and you asked about, Rita, that's more about township employees and or town employees
Oh,
you can and
okay.
can't do politically.
Gotcha. So this has to stay.
I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't, I wouldn't say it has to stay, but civil service rules by the state of Pennsylvania it's written this way.
okay. Yeah, I was more asking for clarification. So I guess it's saying we can have one member of town council on the personnel board as a personnel board member, and one member of the teaching profession. Again, I'm not sure how that's.
I think the teaching profession probably comes from like University of Pittsburgh, because they're considered employees of the state. And so it just specifies you can have one member. I think that's what it's geared towards. I don't know. But that would be my guess if I had to guess, is because, or even like an NA teacher would technically be an employee of the school district, which is probably considered
That's what I said.
some subdivision of the state somehow.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, and this is Falco weighing in on this. Yeah, definitely from the discussion, this is taken from a statewide perspective. So to the extent that the town has individual ordinances that create, those conflicts and when you can and can't serve on different panels, we definitely want to be as consistent with what the town has in place as possible.
Yep. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna try to move a little bit more quickly here because I know Falco has only a few minutes left. Couple of changes I made. It says a secretary. We've never had a secretary, so I cross that off. We can certainly create that position if you guys think that that's some sort of ambivalent. We need a secretary, or you think we should have one, we can add one. I crossed off the annual report. To my knowledge, that's nothing we've ever done. I'm scrolling down a lot. Hold on. The real crux of what we need to talk about is in this general examination requirements, which is on page. Oh gosh, I just lost it now.
About 11, I think it is.
Oh, mine's showing like 17.
Oh, really? It
Just
must
give
be because of
just give the
word.
article number.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Article
chapter 3.
314, right?
3.10 is where it starts. And then it goes into more detail, 3.13 and 3.14. So with this past examination process, I was recommending some changes to the range of scores. And then the other thing that we were asked to consider, I think by town council, was as we think about the process for scoring. So there's definitely some, I think it was David that pointed out some inconsistency in the document itself. And that's because I want us to think about what that scoring process looks like going forward. So I'm not recommending changing the 60-40 necessarily, the split of the oral versus the written exam. What I'm recommending is perhaps we have a higher, like it's out of 200 or 300 points versus only 100. And then we still maintain that same ratio. And we still do the 10 veterans points at the end. But just gives us a little bit more leeway in, you know, if you do it out of 100 points, then there's just not a lot of room for differentiation, I guess I would say.
And Falco, what are the rules around that? Are there rules around, you know, how you set up that scoring? Can it be, you know, two separate, 100 for the written and 100 for the oral, or? And I know I'm asking potentially a question that cannot be answered in the minute that you have available.
Yeah, I think again, we have to look because there is some language in the ordinance that deals with the scoring and how that scoring is done. So we start there, and without changes to that, we have to operate within that structure. So if I recall correctly, it obviously does talk, as we all know, you know, based on percentages. I don't remember, not having it in front of me, I don't want to misspeak, whether it locks it into the 100 points as the how you develop those percentages. So again, if we want to expand beyond what's in the ordinance, then we might have to go and have the ordinance amended. But if we still operate within those parameters, then we can provide more structure in terms of how that scoring occurs. You know, as Amy's saying, and I think those that have been on the board know, you know, that those were some of the struggles in both the sergeant examination as well as the entry level. So, but we have to start with what the ordinance has in place right now.
Okay, and then the only other thing I'm unclear on with that, and I'm specifically thinking of the veterans preference, but I don't know if there's other things out there like that. How are those written? Are those written as, you know, that like the veterans preference, is that 10 points or is that 10% of the overall score? You know, how is the state law written on that? Do you know that off the top of your head?
My recollection is that it is based on those additional 10 points. I think that's both by law as well as, of course, what's in the ordinance currently. The law may speak in terms of more generality, in terms of giving, just recognizing that preference must be given. So it may leave it more up to the local personnel boards and civil service commissions to say how that looks.
Okay, I just want to
But
make sure that whatever
right
we
now,
do is
definitely the
consistent.
ordinance requires the 10 points.
Yeah,
I'm
I just
sorry.
want to make sure whatever we do is consistent with, you know, the Pennsylvania state law on it. Because we not only have to look at the town ordinance, but we have to make sure we're complying with the state laws on it.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
correct.
Well, and I'm not opposed to, if we think it's the right thing to do, I want to get this right. So I'm not opposed to changing the ordinance if we decide that that's what needs to be done to make this process more clear going forward.
I sent a link to the personnel board ordinance in the chat. So, you know, if anyone wants to look at it, it's way down in 137.05 down in section 204. It doesn't look like it specifies points. It just specifies percentages.
Oh, interesting. And this document, which again is just a draft for us to revise, does address veterans preference points in section 3.14, the one that we're looking at as rules and regulations. But that's a great question, David. Is it guidance? Is it law? We absolutely have to stay consistent within the law, but if it's just guidance, then we can adjust it to make it make sense for McCandless.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
keep it-
law, but it's not specified the way that you implement it, I guess. So it's, I think it's law that you give preference points, but if my recollection is correct, and I don't know if it is, I don't think the law specifies how you apply those preference points.
So just for my edification, so make sure I'm understanding correctly, are we saying 10 points as 10 percentage points?
That's what I don't know. That's what we have to check the state law on, is whether, because to me, it wouldn't make sense that the state law would just refer to it as raw points without having any base of, comparison. Because saying 10 points, what does that mean? If a township can say, okay, it's out of 1 million points.
Right.
So I would guess that it says a percentage, but I don't know whether it does or not. And I don't know if there's other things out there like the veterans preference. I don't know if there's state law out there that has other points like that. I don't think there is, but I don't pretend to know that there isn't.
This is Brad. I can tell you every civil service test I've ever taken, it's been out of 100%. And those 10 points usually are added right to that 100%.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's how we've done it as well.
Makes
Yeah,
sense.
so whenever we just have to know what the law is on that to make sure we comply with that and make sure whatever we have in those, in this document is consistent.
Okay, so I don't want to spend the whole time on this. Again, we're not gonna go through line by line. Let me see if there's anything else I want to mention. Oh, there's some stuff later on about how people are notified about their scores. Again, that's something to look at and consider. I think we publicized the overall score, but not the specific. We gave them their written score, and I think we gave them their overall score. I don't know that we gave every candidate the oral score, but maybe we should going forward. So that's something to consider as well.
Question on the oral score, was the change made where it says examination will be graded on a scale of 60 to 100. So you are limiting us as we grade them to not go lower than 60 on a scale of 100.
That's my
So-
recommendation, yes.
So that's that's like passing everybody. I mean, I don't know why that has to be 60 to 100.
I can jump in. I think that's to keep people from torpedoing one sole member of the board to torpedo everybody.
I understand that, but that's not as a teacher, as a person who's done this, it doesn't make sense to me. If someone is not hitting that 60%, like make it 40. That would give a little bit of leeway to somebody who doesn't hit the mark. I think that would be more logical if you want to hit it at 40 or even 50, which is failing on a scale of 100.
Yeah,
Just a
and
point.
failing score is 70. Anything less than 70 is failing. So just doing the math, like 40. I mean, I could go with 40 or 50. I think what happens mathematically is if you have 3 people scoring and someone gives them a 0, even if the other 2 people gave them 100.
Yeah, 0 is ridiculous. That's a ridiculous score to give. But I think that there is a range that makes sense more so than just 60 seems. So 70 is passing on this, right?
Correct.
So yes. Okay, so maybe 50%. 50% is half.
Yeah.
I'm just that's just what my point of view is, but
No, I think that's reasonable. I mean, and that's why, I put this out there as, let's talk about it, let's consider it. I would like everyone to go through and think about how you would change this, but that's a good point, Rita. Maybe 50 versus 60 makes sense.
Keeping in mind, we can always revisit this documentation, and if we're finding that 50% is not, it's not usable,
right.
that maybe
right.
then we adjust up, maybe 55 or
Exactly.
60.
And
So
Yeah,
I think that was an odd thing that happened, but I just think you have to think
well,
about
and
that.
the risk is a little bit less now because we have 5 members.
Yes.
And
yes,
so there'll be 5 graders.
Exactly.
And I think going forward, we should, however we set the interviews up, we should make sure that everybody is involved and everybody, well, and the voting members vote. The alternates can't vote. But that way you have 5 voting members and like I said, the last time with only 3 scorers, I saw the potential for abuse there before it happened. Here, if we, the combination of 5 voting members and raising that minimum score, I think to even 40 or 50, it's definitely a big step in the right direction. Maybe we don't nail it on our first try, but like Justin and Rita said, okay, if we don't nail it on our first try, we can adjust in the future, but I think at the very least, it gets us 90% of the way there.
Yeah, and I would say even though we have 5 members, the interview process is very time consuming. So
Mhm.
I put in here that we should have at least 2, preferably 3 or more members present for all of the oral interviews. But keep in mind, you can't be there for 4 and not there for 2. So, everyone who's voting has to be present for all the oral interviews of all of the candidates. And it is a
Right.
time-consuming process. So maybe not all 5 people can do that, given their work and other responsibilities. So I wouldn't assume that we necessarily have 5 scores.
Well,
So
that's
just to give
why
a
we're on
practical-
here. We're on
Yeah.
here, we're on this committee, and that's our job. And so we commit to that, and we have to figure out how to do that. And we can't change the meetings in the middle, and that was a problem. So, yeah, we can do it. It is long, I have to say.
And just to give a practical example, so as an example, if 4 people were to score 75 points for a candidate and one person was to score 50, the lowest, that would still be 350 points divided by 5. So it'd still be a 70 passing score then for that candidate. So if one person was looking to actively torpedo just to score the less, so that means there has to be a reasonable scoring as far as amongst the other 4 members. So taking into account personalities and the mathematics behind it, I think 50 is probably a great starting point.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. I like that. And not that I'd be opposed to 60, but I think 50 is a good starting point. And I think if we just get the bones of that idea into this document, it's not hard to make the change from 50 to 60. Like, it's getting the idea into the document that's the
Or
hard
50 to
part.
40.
Yeah.
Or say, yeah, or 50 to 40, whatever way we think it should go. It won't be hard to change that number, but the big idea is the important thing to get in there.
Right. Okay, so being that we have less than 20 minutes left and we still have another topic, let's take it as a to-do to look at this document between now and the next meeting. And the next meeting, maybe we can in fact go section by section, and we can have someone, I'd be happy to record and try to show it on my screen so that we can do it real time. Or if there's verbiage that you'd like to send me in advance, perhaps I can incorporate that and just try to get a version that we can all then review.
Amy, could we, and it's up to you and everybody else, but maybe just for the next meeting, could we just focus on that top alternate part and then the scoring part? And then so that we can take it in stages and really focus on that instead of, because it's like a 30-something page document.
Yeah,
And these seem to be the two biggest things that you highlighted.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'd throw it out there that maybe for the next meeting, we just focus on these two things. And then for the meeting after that, maybe go through the rest of it. That would just be my idea.
yeah, sure. Works for me. Okay, so transitioning back to our agenda, procedures for staffing metrics review. So as you recall, in our last meeting in January, Justin said he was going to take a look and see what other just kind of research what happens in other townships. I did include some documents on the SharePoint site that I did not send out. And one of the documents that I sent out were just some bullet points that are now like 3 years old about our staffing metrics. And Sergeant Detective Egley pointed out that I think there it says we had 28 members. Now we actually have 26. When you look at the metrics as compared to neighboring townships, some of them suggest we should have as many as 52 officers. So I think the bottom line is we need more officers. We need more leaders in the ranks of McCandless. But Justin, I'll let you take this one.
Sounds good. Thank you. So I went out to Franklin Park, North Shaler, as far as just to have some informal conversations based off of their staffing levels and where they sit. Unsurprisingly, almost to a person, they had said that, well, we kind of inherited our staffing numbers and kind of just go to council or our town or our local government to see if we can just ask for additional headcount. Really don't have like a very definitive metric of how we're measuring this against certain things. I also sit on the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership Clean and Safe Committee, where often we talk about the staffing levels, specifically in Zone 2 and what those challenges are, and understanding they're about 30% down. I can tell you just as of last week, we had a very interesting conversation in that specific group with the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership, where it came out of we're trying to understand how do we evaluate how short of resources we are from a law enforcement standpoint. And something came out in that conversation, and something I'd like to share with the group. Pittsburgh Downtown, specifically in that group, they provide statistics on the types of crime that are happening. So, and just for those of us on the call, and I'm sure, Detective Sergeant totally gets this, really it's part 1 and part 2 crimes. So as far as the part 1 crimes are essentially, they're your more severe crimes. They're your rapes, your burglaries, things of that nature. Part 2 can be like the lesser crimes. And then there's the traffic offenses. And then there's things actually qualified as other crimes. Based out of that, I had some interesting data from the city of Pittsburgh of what they see on a monthly basis, and that changed. So the plus minus change as far as whatever that delta is. I think that metric might be a helpful metric for us to understand maybe where we should be. And maybe we could take into account a few other things, like what are the patrol miles we have within the town of McCandless. Do we provide resource officers to schools? If so, what's that staffing level? So what I'd like to propose is that we take a stab in sometime between this meeting and next meeting, and we'll probably have to work it offline and via SharePoint and other documents we're going to share. And Detective Sergeant, I'll be working with you. I'll be working with Chief Hawk, really to understand what types of incidents do we have in a town, and what's the frequency, and how long does it take to generally respond to. Understanding if you have maybe a part 1 crime, you have a responding officer that maybe has backup, so now there's 3-4 hours is taken per officer in that. Then it transitions to you as a detective as far as to take it, the investigation, run it through the course, run it through when you have to respond and go to court and all those fun things. Have just a basic, essentially what this would be a work time study to understand what your needs really are. Because I have a feeling we're going to find that we might not be short 6 officers. We might be short 10 or 15 officers. However, maybe this gives us an opportunity to quantify the data and then understand if we can't get that complete head count, let's get the head count we want to go after in a reasonable fashion. But then also, how do we redistribute work and where your areas of focus are, where you have your strengths, where you have your areas of opportunity and development. And if you have those areas of opportunity and development, maybe this will give us that extra incentive to go after grant dollars for training and development, things that would become attractive as far as from a law enforcement standpoint, not just for the existing officers, but people that would want to maybe potentially come aboard and look for opportunities here. So what I would like to do is over the next week, just share with you guys, and I'll get you some documentation of, and this is for everybody's edification, what the part 1 crimes are, part 2 crimes are. I'll get you examples from the city of Pittsburgh that I can share with this group as far as how they classify their crimes, how they do their data. I can tell you that I know they're 30% plus down. And I can tell you specifically for this group and for the public that they do not have a staffing plan right now. Their staffing plan right now is filling in from other zones. So I think we would probably be leading our region in understanding our metrics, coming up with a very distinct strategy, and then really addressing those gaps. So I want to open us up to discussion as far as thoughts on establishing metrics and kind of working it that way. Rita.
That is really a great way. Numbers speak volumes to getting grants and everything else. But I do have a question.
Sure.
One of the things they're doing in the city, of course, is using the county police now. And we have a large park that is a lot of acres, and we do not police that. It is done by the county. And do we, and one of the police officers might be able to tell us, do we share, resources somehow with those officers, or is that like totally separate? And would that be something that we should look at as well?
So I can answer that. So the county police handle any call inside of North Park itself, although they usually have one car out in the area. So if it's anything that requires more than a one officer response, they will call us for assistance. So initially, they're going to be dispatched to the call itself, but depending on the severity of the call, whether it be, disorderly persons, a traffic accident, a party with a lot of people who are unruly, whatever it may be, they will call for assistance, and then our officers will respond to assist them as needed. Even though they do have a substation here, this North Park substation is not only responsible for North Park. They go to several other parks as well. That's just where they report for duty each day. So it's not like they're just driving, circles around North Park all day long. They have several areas throughout Allegheny County that they're responsible for. So sometimes they'll even say, can you start a McCandless car until we get, an officer back into the area? They're not always in the park itself.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Sure.
I think another part of the metrics we need to also look at is the time. Is there a way to get when a call is placed to when our officers are able to respond? Because that can show they're busy on another call, and because we're short, it takes 10, 15, 20 minutes to get a police officer, for help. I think that's something we really need to look at. 'Cause I've been told an individual who passed away in my parents' neighborhood a few years ago, they were waiting for help. It was actually paramedics. They couldn't even get there. And unfortunately, one of our police officers got there soon enough and was able to help do CPR, but he passed away. But I think
That's a great metric.
Yeah,
That's
the
a great
response
metric.
time. Yeah, the response time is always on the CAD, the
Yeah.
computer aided dispatching. It'll have the time that the call was actually received, the time that it was dispatched to the officer, and then the time that the officer arrived on scene. That's all recorded on there as well.
And then one other piece I want to bring up, I know this could be an area of sensitivity, but I want to give it due consideration, is also the amount of overtime it's worked, right? So there's a certain expectation, especially I know in law enforcement, that they have at least some availability to overtime. And I know a lot of that's negotiated even in the contracts as far as from a union perspective. But that's also a good metric as far as if we have some areas where maybe it's times of the year or whatever, where we have overtime in excess of where we'd like to be. That would give a good idea of where we would need additional resources as well. So if everybody in this call is comfortable, what I'll do is I will take a stab at the metrics as far as what the general classifications are. We'll collaborate all together. We'll come to a consensus of what is a good metrics for evaluation, and then I'll start filling in the data. Now, from a law enforcement assistant standpoint, so Detective Sergeant, you and Chief, I'll need some of your help getting access some of that data. And I want to be sure that I'm doing so in an appropriate manner and
Sure.
fashion. And then also, I'll throw this out there, guys. I think that this might be something useful once we get a handle of what our needs are and how we're going to measure. This could be something that we share with our neighboring communities as far as what we're looking at and how we evaluate. Not saying our data necessarily. What I'm saying is as far as the methodology we use to maybe help them, because when we look at it from a partnership standpoint, I mean, it's obviously we have a problem in the town that we want to solve, but also it's probably be a good gesture that we show other areas is, hey, here's how we evaluated it. Here's the metrics we used. You know, if you have any thoughts or concerns, you know, we'd love to hear it too. Because honestly, I mean, when we're hiring people and officers, we're hiring from these neighboring communities, right? So it could be a win-win in a lot of different aspects for us.
The only other thing I'd like to add in there, in your matrix, if you could consider, just think about it as well. Aside from the obvious answering 911 calls for service, we do get a lot of requests also for active shooter presentations. It's this day and age. Today alone, I have 2 different emails from 2 different venues. They're usually schools, places of worship, things of that nature. Sometimes corporate drive, some of the office buildings every once in a while I've done as well. So that's also an additional resource. I usually get those because I don't traditionally count as manpower on the shift. But then that also takes away from investigators' duties depending on what comes in that day. So we're kind of being pulled in several different directions. So just, you know, something else that we can talk about in the future when you're doing your matrix.
That's fantastic. I appreciate that.
I would also include the populations for like the local area, because I was just looking up, like Ross has decreased, they're down to 30,487 in population. So that way we have an idea. I'm actually trying to look up Bradford Woods, but it looks like for Northern Regional, they're probably close to like, it looks like it's definitely under 30,000 population. So again, we understand that number statistically to the 40 officers, or whatever their officers are.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting, this US Department of Justice guidelines. So this, one of them, I don't know who put this document together. Chief Hawk might know, but this, again, it's 3 years old already. And this is citing in 2010, the International Association of Chiefs of Police shows an average of 1.8 officers per 1,000 residents. Now, obviously, all of this data around types of crimes, McCandless is not looking at the kind of crimes that the city of Pittsburgh has, I would imagine, as well as response time, that sort of thing. Like, I think this is informational, and I think this is these little sound bites, you know, could be used to sort of educate town council and our citizens and that sort of thing. And what I don't want to do is have us spend a ton of time doing this and then for to what end? So I guess I would ask Carolyn and Jack, is there the ability to add more officers? Is that even a possibility in terms of budgeting? Or maybe Brian, maybe this question is for Brian. You know, let's say Justin used the example, maybe we're not down 6, we're down 12 officers or whatever. Like, okay, so we come back with a recommendation, then what? Is that useful to have that information, or doesn't it matter?
Oh, I think it's very useful, and I think, you know, I think all council should be able to view this, and in the end, you know, make a decision based upon that. I mean, I value our safety. That's, to me, it's number one. So whatever the numbers show, I think we need to take that all into consideration and then decide. I mean, I believe there's room also to hire more too. It just, you know, and we'd have to budget for all that, but.
Yeah, information is everything. I mean, once you're informed, you have to make a decision, but at least you have that before you. And I think that's important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's also information that town council can use for other purposes. Justin, I think you mentioned, you know, that's something you might be able to put as part of a grant application for certain equipment to say, you know, look, we're short 10 officers, but if we get the grant for this, you know, I don't know what the equipment would be, but if we get a grant for this equipment, that takes care of the efficiencies that provides, saves us 1 or 2 of those positions. So you can use what's going to come out of this, not only just for the budgeting, but for those other purposes as well. And it gives you a solid you know, it gives you numbers and data to anchor it to, not just, hey, we want to try this program because we think it'll work. It's a, hey, we want to try this program because we're short 10 officers, and here's how it'll save 2 officers worth of work. And that translates to this much of a benefit for us.
Another thing to keep in mind too, we can also, and I would strongly want to do this, is listen, if using the example, we need 12 officers and we're maybe only budgeted for half that. What we can do is, as a result of the data, you know, we'll work internally as a team and work with chief and his leadership and determine and risk assess what's the most critical things that they need to hit first. So if the ask is 12, but realistically get half, okay, here's the half we need, and here's the areas of focus. Maybe we need somebody that has a strong cybersecurity, you know, background as far as we're getting increased in scams and calls and investigations in that area. Maybe we have somebody, to, you know, Detective Sergeant's point, that is a great facilitator that has done active shooting trainings. So here's somebody, when we hire them, we're going to look for these specific skill sets in this specific area. So we can be a little bit more prescriptive rather than just give you raw data of, hey, we're short this amount. We can say, okay, we're short this amount, but the area of focus and from a risk assess standpoint is, here's the areas in which we need focus as far as in our targeting, if that makes sense.
Well, and that's a great point, because you can then take that data and that risk assessment and work it into the grading of interviews, to say, of candidates, to say, you know, there might be 2 candidates that are equally impressive, but one of them has the exact background that you want for the skills. That's your highest priority. So again, that's just another use of this data that gets pulled together.
And it gives the council, as far as, we're not painting into a corner now. So now it's, instead of you approving a broad breadth, it's you're approving sections and parts and pieces to get to an endpoint of where we want to be whole, but we're on our way there, right? So it gives a lot more flexibility from that perspective, and from a budget piece too. So
Yeah.
I'm excited, guys. I'm looking forward to doing this. So I'll probably start setting up some workshops as far as with chief and leadership, just to get off the ground. And then I'll come back to the greater group here and say, okay, here's what we've kind of fleshed out. Let's get other pieces, what you think needs to be put in there. Let's understand as far as how we're going to, you know, score and evaluate. And then I'll start churning through some data. So.
And Falco's not on the call anymore, right?
Yeah.
Because the only thing to keep in mind is, I believe, like for any workshops or anything, Justin, you wouldn't be able to have more than 2 other members from this board involved at once. You know, you can have different people involved, but once there's 3 people from the board involved, it's then a quorum, and it's and then it's Sunshine Act issues.
Yep.
I believe that applies equally to the board as it does to town council.
So more than likely, I'll probably do this asynchronously as far as from a board perspective. I'll take lead, and then I'll bring it back after the fact, and just to keep things moving, because I would like to move kind of quickly on this. I can give you a time estimate on the data crunching. I kind of took some raw extracts as far as with some conversations from Zone 2, downtown Pittsburgh. Probably is going to take a little bit of time. It's probably going to take between 6 and 8 weeks. So I do want to set that expectation, because I want to be sure that being careful with the data, getting good data, presenting it appropriately. The good thing about this is it's going to be iterative. So you're not going to be surprised in 8 weeks when, oh, I'm just getting everything turnkey. You're going to see things coming through over the weeks, and for conversations and for evaluation. And then what I'm saying is, in that between that 6 and 8 week time frame, we should have close to, if not a finished product, as far as here's the data, you know, here's the risk assessed, you know, recommendations, and then here you go.
Well, Justin, we appreciate you taking the lead on this. Let the rest of us know how and when you'd like our involvement and help. And just looking at the time, we're supposed to be done. I know Matt has to leave soon, but any updates for us, Detective Sergeant Egley, on what's going on in the police department?
No, they're still working on installing the body worn cameras. We do have those here. They're still working on the installation and outfitting them in the vehicles. The stations and the station itself that we actually put the devices in are installed. they're working on converting the vehicles over where they sync up with the in-car cameras. That's the main project that's occurring right now.
And our dog is coming soon.
Really?
I think yesterday or at the meeting on Jack, right? We pretty
that-
basically said go, right?
Yeah, and that's still planned, but the training, just to understand the training schedule,
Yeah.
what works for the officer that is planning to do it. Still gonna be, probably later, after late in the summer. I think the next training schedule that works for his schedule starts in June, so not something that happens tomorrow,
No.
but we've been working on the go-ahead to get that going, so.
Yeah.
Which officer is that, Brian?
The puppy.
I believe it's Officer Davis is the one that's interested in doing this. Because at the end of the day, that's a big piece of this is, do you have an officer that really wants to do it? Because it is a huge time commitment for them, because that's their take home service animal that lives with them, lives with their family. And, that's not just how, he handles it day to day, it's how his family handles it too, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's exciting. Okay. Oh, Jack, if you're talking to us, you're on mute.
To that point, it's probably good to consider police officers in the future that would have dog handling skills, because there's different types of dogs for different types of situations. I think it's important to have a dog to protect the officers when they go to like domestic disputes and what have you. But that dog might not necessarily be good at discovering firearms or drugs. So we should probably keep that on the radar to have some discussion about different types of dogs that we want to deploy in the future.
Yeah, it's a great point. Okay, any comments from the public?
I'd just like to say that I appreciated the agenda and the Zoom link that was provided.
All right, great. We're trying to get better at that. And also, it was brought up that some of our, maybe most of our previous agendas and minutes are not posted on the website. So I know that the town is working on uploading all of those. So that everyone has access to those. But thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I believe there might be one that we were still looking for, but I think we have everything. And, it's one of those that's kind of switched in the requirement of the municipality is just to have those on file somewhere. And we, because the way this this particular committee meeting has been handled, it wasn't getting explained the right way to someone else, kind of thing, to get everything out. So that's where we are now. I think we fixed everything in that sense. And also just an update on adjustments to the Sunshine Act that came out of COVID that we do need to put an agenda out before 24 hours before the meeting. That was a new thing for everybody. Some places have adjusted better than others. So we're just, hopefully we caught up with everything we need to take care of.
That's great.
Thanks for drawing that to our attention, Glenn.
Thank you, Jack.
All right, anything else before we adjourn?
The only quick question I would have is, since we're meeting at 9 again, I don't know if we have to, what our notice requirements are going forward for that. Like if we have to put a notice out before every meeting, it's not at 9:30, it's at 9.
That's been handled with Sandra.
Okay.
We advertised the new updated schedule for
Oh, that's been advertised, so it's, good,
Yeah.
thank you.
legal requirements have been met, and we just have to have our agenda out by 9 a.m. 24 hours before.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
And I know also that Chief Hawk is working on getting a better solution for those who want to meet in person. It doesn't work well to have some in person and some online currently because of the technology constraints, but they're trying to figure that out with I think one of the rooms at Town Hall, so.
Yeah, I can have him confirm that, but he did leave a note here if I could express that he said he will plan on the next meeting being in the Powers Room upstairs in Town Hall.
Okay,
Is that that's the main town hall
Yes,
for Lake Council meetings?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
and
That makes sense.
I imagine we will always have to have the option to be both physically and virtually present, but hopefully we can make that work, that hybrid arrangement.
I think we've adjusted that. I mean, the Powers Room itself wasn't designed to be the hybrid model, but it's the best option we have right now. So
Yeah, All right, thank you, everyone. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
We'll move to adjourn.
I second.
Favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very
So,
much.
good meeting.
Thank you all.
Care.
Bye.